Welcome along to another episode here at Aviation Industries. This time around I thought we'd better go and have a look at my HBX 16889A Pro here. This excellent little stunt monster truck was the first truck I bought in my RC career, and as such it's the truck that I compare all other trucks to. So I thought we'd better go back to autumn this year here in southern Western Australia and show you what it's all about and the absolute riot that I had running this truck for the first 4 weeks. I ran about 5 or 6 packs a day through this thing. It really is defiant against the odds because it just keeps going. There was no amount of poor driving that could kill this thing. It stood up to everything brilliantly. The only thing that really went wrong with it in the end was a worn out rear dog bone axle, and I have a feeling that was because of my own mistake putting some liquid lithium grease on there instead of dry grease. I have a feeling that wore it out a bit sooner than it otherwise would have. It's not a perfect truck, but it is greater than the sum of its parts because it would just continuously be a fun truck no matter really what kind of problems I was having with it. I did have some issues with the steering and the suspension, but it was never, it was always fun to drive. It didn't matter about any of those problems. I still managed to have an absolutely awesome time with it. So I thought we'd better go back and have a look at it before I move ahead with some of the other trucks that we've got here. So yeah, please kick back, make yourself comfy, and enjoy this look at the mighty but flighty HBX 16889A Pro. Boom.
So this is the first day I ever ran this truck, and I pretty quickly noticed that while it performs really well on the hard packed sand in the middle ground there, it does struggle a bit on the rougher gravel and the rougher terrain. Being such a light truck with such small wheels, it really bounces around quite a bit and makes it pretty challenging to control on anything but a hard, smooth surface. And on the hard packed and damp lawn, the wheels still struggle to get a grip, and it was really hard to get a straight launch at that little ramp. And the other problem was that it really can't surmount a small curb or some small bricks very easily just because of those tiny little wheels, which does make it challenging in the great outdoors.
Okay, so I wanted to do a size and weight comparison here. This is the MJX 14210. Not really a huge difference in size there. The main difference between these two, apart from maybe an inch or two, they're about the same width, as you can see. The main difference is the weight, with the MJ weighing in at 1.3 kilos and this little guy weighing in at just 850 grams. So quite a big difference there. Still haven't fixed my MJ. The HBX 903A here, 12 scale, weighing in at 1.2 kilos. This is where things start to, you can see a bit more difference here.
A much more pronounced difference in size between these two, and quite a bit of extra weight on the 12 scale as well.
And finally, the Armour Outcast 4S. Huge difference here. This thing's supposedly a 10 scale or a 1/8 scale. I can never really work that out. Some people call it a 10, some people call it a 1/8. Maybe if you know the answer there, you can drop that in the comments. But obviously a huge difference here in size and scale. They do perform both really well as stunt trucks. So you know, this is where I guess both cost and the room that you have to run is a big factor.
So it didn't take me long to figure out that the best way to run this thing was on the hard court, on the tarmac, and I built up some impromptu ramps and set about trying to launch this thing into the stratosphere. It really is the perfect truck for this kind of abuse, being so light and has such a great propensity to land on its feet. It really makes the experience very enjoyable. And it kind of makes you feel like a better driver than you are. Speaking of great driving, this is what Where's Wally looks like when he thinks he's about to run over his 2-year-old. Fortunately spared from such a fate on that occasion and able to get back into some of the action. I think what helps this thing bounce and land on its feet so well is its tiny little wheels. And you'll see in the workshop here how worn out they are after 4 weeks of thrashing around on the hard stuff, but they have stood up to the abuse really well. This is my rebuild of the truck after 4 weeks. You see the rear shock tower there having a tiny little bend in it, nothing really to worry about. The body shell has stood up really well as well. There's a bit of a hole in the back there and a bit of a tear in the front, but overall it's stood up exceptionally well. You can see the tear there in the front bumper, and I have had to put a bit of tape around the shock tower mounts. Probably the shell could use reinforcing all the way through, but it's nice to keep it nice and light as well. I do have a spare shell that I ordered from a Black Son 16th scale truck, which are available here in Australia. Not exactly the same size, but close enough that I can drill some holes and make that work. I still enjoy running the orange body the most. I'll probably do some mods to it in the future. So this dog bone, like all of them, starting to wear out. You can see the culprit there with the missing pin that completely wore out from the liquid grease that I was running on them. I since learned that you're supposed to run dry grease on those. And inspecting the diffs now, and one of the gears has lost a tooth there, but that's the only damage to any of the gears or the diffs. The center drive shaft there still in great nick, and still nice and straight. So what I like to do when I rebuild these diffs is give them a nice bath in degreaser. So just stripping them down here and putting them all in the bath and giving them a good wash before the rebuild and re-greasing them. One of the first things I wanted to do when I was running this truck was to re-grease the diffs. It was really squeaking a lot, and it was driving me crazy, and I could tell it just wasn't running as smoothly as it should. It seems like out of the factory you just don't get the amount of grease that you ought to. So one of the first things I did when I was running it was to strip the diffs and to rebuild them or re-grease them. One of the lessons I learnt doing that was not to waste money on the tiny little tubes of grease that you get down at the hobby shop. You can get a much bigger tub, as you can see there, down at the auto shop, and as far as I can tell, that grease is just as good. This one is thicker than the Tamiya grease that I was initially buying, but for the same price you're getting, I don't know, 10-50 times more grease in that tub than those tiny little tubes. So yeah, I won't be going back to those absolute rip-offs. The other plus side of this grease is that it looks fantastic in blue there. And yeah, just applying some on all the gears and reseating the cover here. Also coming up on screen now is the yellow stick of dry lube that I use for the dog bones and drive cups, available extremely cheaply at the auto store. And now we'll switch gears back to the court for some more monster stunt trucking action. So I hope you can start to see how much fun I've been having with this thing and the amount of punishment that it's been enduring. It really doesn't complain. It did pop a few dog bones here and there, but apart from that, it really has been flawless. You'll probably hear that it's running a little smoother now that I've done the grease. And one of the things I really started to enjoy was to throw a little sand down on the court there and start to drift it around. And after greasing the diffs, I found that the performance of the four-wheel drive really came to life, and it really does drift extremely well. Yeah, and that was one of my favorite things to do with the truck, and especially, you know, going from ramps to drifting and dodging dodging a few incoming projectiles. It's just a ton of fun, and you know, it's the size that it's not going to do too much damage if you do cop one. It was pretty unpredictable by now though, and the front, the steering was starting to get pretty loose. I feel like that's a common problem with these little trucks, and I haven't really figured out how to solve that. Maybe you can leave some suggestions of what to do about the steering systems in these trucks. I got so much fantastic feedback in my last video. I'm sure someone will have a bright idea on what to do about that. You'll see sort of how squirrely it's really become, and yeah, but like I say, it was still fun, even as unpredictable as it had become. It was still just a lot of fun just to bash around like this. I think this suspension was another big factor. I started trying to tweak the suspension. I put some, I think it was 45 weight shock oil in them, but I found that these shocks would never hold the oil for long. I don't know if that was just sort of me being a beginner and not really knowing how to reseal them and sort of mount them effectively. But I did end up swapping them with some slightly larger shocks off a 14th scale bonsai buggy that I had. You can see in the slow motion here, this is just going straight, that the torque twist will just twist that chassis as it launches and made it really unstable. So hopping back into the workshop here and getting close to the rebuild, I did add a brand new wheelie bar, not because there was anything wrong with it, but because I ended up putting that on the 903. It just bolts straight on, which is very handy. So a new wheelie bar and rebuilding the shock arms and just testing the running gear there with the new grease that's in it, and whacking the wheels back on. And you'll get a good look here at the fronts or the steering once I start to run these wheels, and you'll get a sense of the way that the front just will not maintain its stability when it's accelerating. A little slow to get going here, but once the grease wears in, it's running really well. And you can see on the front end there, yeah, you can see there that it's really quite wobbly under the force of acceleration. But that was really the biggest complaint I have about this truck. So yes, getting towards the third and fourth week of running this thing now, and the suspension has been dialed in. I have tightened up the steering as much as possible, still not perfect, but you can see it's running a lot straighter and smoother now, and you can see how well it drifts and how much fun that is. I'm really starting to get a feel for the truck, and just having an absolute blast. There's just really no better way to blow off some steam after a long day with this thing, because you know it's going to handle all the abuse you can chuck at it and just keep popping up for some more. So I think for a stock truck without any mods, it really is one of the best value trucks on the market. That's probably not anything new, that's pretty well documented by now, but it's certainly something I would agree with. And yeah, you'll see me start trying to do a few front flips here, getting a bit of aerial control. For sure, some bigger wheels would help that, and I do plan on doing some mods to this thing, including suspension, perhaps some metal steering acumen or arms, and also some 3D printed body sliders and reinforcements for the body. I'll definitely be doing a video on that in the near future, so stay tuned for that. If you've got any suggestions for me on how to improve this truck, please drop those in the comments for me. It'd be great to get that conversation going. This is one of my favorite trucks, and I'll certainly be doing some more coverage of this thing as we move forward.
Thanks for watching, guys. That was my take on the mighty little 1688 9A Pro. I really did enjoy running this truck and also putting this together. It was a great opportunity to, they say limitation breeds creativity. Is that what they say? Being limited to the single camera that I used at the time helped me focus on a few other aspects of the video making process, which I've really enjoyed. Now that this is taken care of, I can move forward again. I've got some big plans for the channel, a few surprises in store, so please stay tuned. And once again, thanks for watching. Cheers guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Did you see that?